Hello, I'm Toycat, and the United Nations is perhaps the only truly global governmental organization. North Korea, Iran, and Switzerland can sit round a table and work out their problems, but what's interesting is the countries that aren't covered, I mean, the green bubbles we'll leave to the side, but also Niue and the Cook Islands are the only eligible non-member states that aren't included. Obviously, Antarctica isn't sovereign territory, and Western Sahara is... well, we'll leave that to the side for now, to mention the fact that Hungary is floating, leaving the WHO, which is one of the best-known UN organizations. In fact, it's not just Hungary who's leaving it. Trump and Milei, the leaders of the United States and Argentina respectively, have already decided to leave, and so this starts to undermine the very notion of having international bodies if more and more countries start to decide that they are going to leave them, right? So why is Hungary about to leave? Why did Argentina and the US leave? It's a really interesting question, which kind of brings us into the big situation with the United States right now, which is basically, yeah, I think the current president is trying to speedrun government. Instead of doing the usual thing where you consult and you make sure everyone's down, you sign 1 trillion executive orders as quickly as you can, and ignoring if that's how US government is supposed to work. There is a more interesting point about, like, yeah, the reason he has decided to leave the body is not actually because he hates it, it's probably what his base thinks, but instead the entire goal is like, yeah, they want us back so badly, let's see what happens. The goal is to instead move the organization more towards the favor of him or his country, depending on how you want to see things. And what's interesting is this isn't the only UN organization that this is happening to. The ICC, the International Criminal Court, is going for a very similar thing, where the US actually has not just decided, like, we're going to leave, they've actually decided to sanction certain officials in the International Criminal Court. This is the this is the big, closest thing we have to a worldwide court system, and it's the only place that we can prosecute genocides. In fact, according to the Treaty of Rome, which, fun fact, the US used to be a treaty signer of, but are not anymore, alongside all of these countries in red, by the way. So, you know, we have an International Criminal Court that covers about 40% of the world population, if we're being pretty generous about the entire thing. And what's interesting is the entire reason it exists is to cover the 4 biggest and kind of international scale crimes. We've got genocide. I keep saying stale crimes instead of scale crimes. I want to clarify, genocide is not stale. Wait, actually, no, genocide is stale. You shouldn't do it anymore. It's gone off, you know. War crimes and crimes of aggression. The idea being that there are some crimes that are so heavy that you can't really prosecute them as a country. You need to do it under the, you know, crimes against humanity as a whole, and should be tried as such. So why is the United States leaving this too? I think ultimately the most interesting thing about the WHO situation is the fact that if you look into it, basically every piece of international order does have quite a few countries outside of it. Here is the Vienna Convention on road signs and signals, and even though you can see, technically speaking, China, Japan, Australia are not, actually I think Australia might be doing their own thing over there, but like most of the countries which aren't signatories and have huge populations actually follow it anyway, but the United States is notably outside of this too, and because Canada seems to borrow their road system from the US, they also are outside of that, and indeed the most famous example of this is probably the way we measure things. We worked out a global system of measurement, and you know what happened? Well, we didn't start using it globally. We got it down to a decent percentage of the world, but still the United States, the world's largest market, does not use the metric system, and if you go to Canada or the UK, you're in for a world of fun, I guess we could say. What's interesting about this, we have to come back to this later, because what's interesting about this is the fact that the WHO losing its members is not just bad on a, so is World Health being undermined in that way, but also it's bad on a funding level. If you ask the who funds us, you know, that's I feel like WHO was a terrible acronym for exactly this reason, but who funds the WHO is a really interesting question you might have, and the answer they will give you is the United Kingdom, actually, by such a large amount. It is $230 million US compared to Germany's 34, which is already more than Sweden's 23 and Australia's 20. Basically, the UK funds the WHO is something I was surprised to learn, but the reason I was surprised to learn it is because it's not true. The way that they will tell you if you go onto their website about how it's funded by default is based on who gives us money with no with pure flexibility, with no obligation on how to fund it. This is effectively saying, yeah, you can it's effectively saying you can do whatever you want with that money as long as it's for health as an organization. We'll trust you, I guess. Whereas the actual biggest list of donors, if we dive into it a bit more, is actually the United States of America, at least in 2022 to 23. I can't imagine that'll be true for 2024. And then it's Germany. Okay, that's not that surprising. And then it's the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Wait, the Bill and Melinda Gates give more money to a UN body, a United Nations body, the World Health Organization. They give more money to them than the UK and Canada and Japan and France. In fact, the last three of those put together, that's kind of crazy. Then you look into GAVI, and it's the Global Alliance for, I think it's like immunization and vaccination. I think it's got to be a French organization based on the way it seems like it's backwards. Basically the Global Vaccine Alliance of the World, which is then itself funded by large members. I think lots of these same countries then fund the Global Alliance for Vaccines. It's very, very interesting to look into how the WHO is funded, because the US clearly is the largest funder, with then private organizations in the US being let's be honest, the third largest funder, but very close to being second. So something like $2 billion a year pours in from the US to the WHO, and the question is, does the US feel like they're getting enough out of that? And I think the interesting problem is, like, on a political level, no. Even if you really like what the WHO are doing, and I think when it comes to stuff like, I think that even the most anti-vaccine people in the world would say, yeah, but smallpox being gone, that's pretty cool, huh? But I think ever since the smallpox eradication, which is like one of the top level moves, I think you get into a world where it's much harder to prevent certain diseases without starting to raise questions about, wait, should you be doing that inside of a country? Should you be having that sort of criticism? And indeed, if we look into an interesting poll, it's just for the UN as a whole, because there's so many different bodies. But the interesting poll here was do countries trust the United Nations to do the right thing? And you can see, like, at the very bottom end of the spectrum, we've got Japan and, oh, surprise, surprise, Argentina. That explains a lot, huh? And at the very top end of the spectrum, we have mostly middle-income countries. Nigeria and China and Kenya and India, Thailand as well. These are all countries that are like, yeah, when we have an international non-governmental body, we have a situation where they actually seem to care. And again, when it comes to, like, middle income health problems, it's really easy to have solutions. Like, again, I think vaccinate against the most common issues, and also have access to sanitation. A ridiculous percentage of the world do not use a actual bathroom, and that causes so many knock-on issues. Just have a sewage, have sewers, have vaccine, have basic healthcare too. Like, if someone is sick, make sure they can get to a hospital in an hour. Like, there is, it's one of those problems where we've solved the bottom 90% of healthcare, and so in the richest countries, we're working on, like, oh, well, if you get this cancer type, you currently live for 4 years. If we do the biggest research and spend billions, maybe you can live for 4.5 on average, by curing X% more. But if you want to spend literally 1/100th as much, malaria nets, for example, there are so many simple ways that you can spend next to nothing and massively improve health outcomes, and that is one of the remits of the WHO. And so why would the US leave that? Besides, the fact that, like, they don't trust it to do the right thing, or exactly half of the US does not, which is very fun given the way their election systems work. But, like, given that, like, a decent percent of people think they are going to do the right thing, why would so many people leave? Well, the official explanation for this is that, yeah, if the, well, it's funny actually, Hungary's explanation is just like, yeah, well, I think if the most powerful country in the world decides to leave, maybe we should consider whether that's a good idea too. There is kind of an effect of, like, well, in certain, any organization which has the most powerful nation giving up some amount of power to make their body work is going to attract other countries. But also, there is a second, which is, I think, the most interesting justification I've ever heard. I really don't get that, personally. Well, I guess I do kind of get it. But the more interesting point is that, like, yeah, if you are going to fund an international body, you kind of expect it to work, if not in your favor, then not actively against you. As an example, the UK is apparently, again, according to this one list, we are the biggest binding contributor to the WHO, which is very nice, right? But different, certain UN bodies, I think is the dumbest example of why people in certain countries end up against it, is because we have this slight hatred towards the concept of globalization in the West. And we don't quite know who to blame it on. This is just my theory personally, that like, you know, when we have all these trade barriers going down, we're also losing certain social protections, and the uniqueness that used to be found between, say, London and Nottingham, or between Birmingham and Nottingham, slowly goes down as the market levels out across both of them. But this loses out on some of the uniqueness between those two cities, and even more so between, like, you know, if you pick the capital of a given European country and then the capital of another given European country, you probably find a surprising amount of similarity between Vienna and Paris, despite the fact that you should not. They used to be two separate empires with a whole empire in between them, and similarly across the world. Capital cities are becoming more similar. People are seeing that there are benefits of globalization, but there are so many negatives which are easier to focus on, and I think that one of the easiest targets is the most global body we have in the world. And so when you see that global body, and you will see them do all sorts of dumb stuff, as an example, the UN put out a press release talking about how they disliked the UK government's they don't like the amount of children in colour living in poverty in the UK. It's 47% of children in colour versus 24% of white children. There's statistics, like, they put out all these sorts of stats which are domestically inflamed policies, and you know, like, to most people, you look at this and you go, okay, that's a weird thing for the UN to be going out and making press releases on. I feel like there are bigger injustices in the world that could be focused on right now, especially if we're talking about, you know, the people of color things. But some people will be like, oh, yeah, the UN is a woke organization. Or if you live in one of the countries where woke is very much not the name of the game, you might see it as like, oh, yeah, I guess, weirdly, you would find that as a more controversial thing in those countries where, because developing countries don't have the luxury of being woke, I would say. But the more interesting point here is, like, when you see a international body being that way, you start to question, yeah, that is a thing that maybe we shouldn't be part of. And that's basically the US's current negotiation strategy. A lot of people around the world, maybe you could argue because of the internet, maybe you could argue because of the poor vaccine rollouts, people have started to become more and more skeptical of global governmental organizations, and by pulling out right now, the US seemingly has the most backers and therefore could get the most concessions. What would the US? Here's the thing, though. What would the USA actually want the WHO to focus on? What would the US actually want the the ICC to focus on? I don't actually know. I think this is one of the messy things. We don't even know the exact people that the US sanctioned. The International Criminal Court is a little mysterious, and maybe that's the question. Maybe it shouldn't be operating in secrecy, and it's kind of annoying to go through all of this. And by the way, one little fun point I want to mention, to make a video more fun. So did you know that if you look at this map right here, and you see that any country in purple or green or red, or indeed yellow. Don't ask me how we don't know the measurement system in Myanmar, but if you look at this map right here, you can see what's interesting is that, oh, yeah, they actually colored in Puerto Rico blue. That must be a silly mistake, right? Except, no, let's go to Puerto Rico. I just went to Puerto Rico for the first time as part of my visit to 5 new countries. I didn't upload this. This was like the secret bonus part, but look, I have been to 58 countries now by ticking off the tiniest countries. You can't even see that they're green now. But anyway, so I went to Puerto Rico because it's the easiest place to see all of that. And basically, I noticed something interesting, which is, like, while I was just walking past a Walmart, you know, as you do when you visit the US, you inevitably end up walking past a Walmart. So I think it was over here. Yeah, that's the Walmart Supercenter. And I walked past this little thing, and I realized, like, oh, wow. Petrol sure is cheap here. Gasoline is like free. I think it was $4 a gallon when I lived in Vegas, and it's only $1 here, except wait, no, that can't possibly be. I think that's cheaper than the literal refining price. I think that this must be per liter. And then I saw somewhere on the petrol pump, like, oh yeah, in liters. Puerto Rico, a part of America, the proudest users of the non-metric system, the customary units or whatever, they use the metric system everywhere. I spoke to a guy. It was the weirdest thing. I spoke to a guy near the boat, and he was like, oh, yeah, it's cold in Manchester right now. And I was like, how are you talking to me about Manchester and how? And he's like, yeah, it's 10 degrees there. And in my brain, I was like, no, we don't go that far below freezing, because I just assume in the US, everyone talks in fake degrees, and I have to say, in real measurements. But no, he was talking in real measurements. It was 10 degrees in Manchester. I still don't know why in Puerto Rico you would know or care about the temperature, but I thought that was interesting. But yeah, what's interesting is actually Puerto Rico does use the metric system like this map says, but technically speaking, even this is a lie because all of their vehicles obviously then come from the United States. And so what does that mean? Well, if we go along a road for a bit here, you can see that they don't follow the UN convention on the way that road signs should work, so that's kind of interesting. Also, the stop signs say pair instead of stop, even though they are otherwise entirely US signs. But the speed limits and the speed gauges and oh wait, there we go, we got it. The speed limits in Puerto Rico are in miles per hour. Actually, you know, it doesn't. From this side, we can't actually say that for sure, but I'm 99.99% sure that that is exactly what I saw. And so, wow, this map is misleading. Puerto Rico is also a gruesome purple. Anyway, though, it's the interesting thing about the world, right? You know, so someone go in and fix this, I guess. Anyway, so yeah, to finish this video, I want to give you a little bit of a I am a globalist rant. I think that the United Nations existing as a global government is one of those really cool goals. Like, every country conceding a little bit of sovereignty so that we can have certain things function on a truly international level would be great. I mean, the UN peacekeeping force is a great example of, you know, like, before the UK properly formed together, even let's just say England and Scotland, to be simple, England and Scotland used to go to war with each other all the time. It used to be a problem every time we'd go and invade the French, our favorite pastime. The French would get into a little alliance with the Scottish people and they'd invade us at the top. It'd be such a pain to like keep going back. So basically the England and Scotland eventually stopped invading each other, and now we formed a political union where we haven't invaded each other for 200 years and we're better off. Sure, English people have to send some money to Scotland. Scottish people have to send some oil to England. It's actually natural gas, I think. But, you know, like, you know, they, more importantly, sovereignty, right? Scotland agrees effectively to be governed by a larger number of people living down there, and England agrees that the whims of people living 500 miles to the north get to equally vote on laws, even if they only apply to England. But the interesting thing here is, the really interesting thing is that, like, despite those compromises, the gains probably were worthwhile, right? I guess actually about 48% of Scottish people would disagree, and a surprisingly similar amount of English people. But the idea of the United States splitting up as, you know, states, for example, would be great for every individual state. You get to make your own rules, and, you know, like, most states don't want to have 21 as their drinking age. It's just required by the federal government. Most states don't want to have to follow this rule. A lot of states don't even want speed limits, or to have, I think for the longest time, Wyoming and Nevada just have their speeding fines set to like $20 and like no points or anything. Like, sure, oh no, look at you speeding, and then they just didn't enforce it. I think that that's actually a cool way to run a country, to say what our citizens care about is what we'll do. But wouldn't it be cool if we all had some system that meant that, you know, you can't just have atrocities happen over here, or over here, or over here, or over here, or over... You know, the point is, but I also think it's one of those ideas where it's like, yeah, I want to live in a world where no one has a job, and where we all just do what we want all day, every day. And it's like, yeah, it's a great idea, but you have to have a lot of steps between now and this being the Federation of Earth. And some of those steps apparently involve tough negotiations between the man with 1 billion executive orders and the world body with 1 billion, I don't know, schemes around the world, not all of which are in the USA's interests, apparently. So yeah, that's the situation with the WHO. And now you know, if someone asks you, who did you say is going to leave that international body? You can say... Who? Yeah, that's the joke. That's as good as I've got. Thank you for watching. I'm gonna go. There's a Lego pop-up in central London. I'm gonna go get myself a free Lego flower now. I'll see you there. Actually, it's there. I hope that I'm saying this. I hope this video takes long enough to go through the monetization checks that you don't know that I'm there. But I'll be at the M&M's world. I'm always amazed by, you know, sorry, this is unrelated to geography, geopolitics, political news. But I'm amazed that one of the like most prime pieces of UK real estate is the M&M world. Like, who goes on holiday? We have a large amount of American tourists who come to London and then buy M&Ms at 10 times the price you'd get in a store. I don't get it. Could someone explain it to me? Look, it's fun that they're doing the Abbey Road thing over there, but if you understand, let me know. Much more classily, we have this. It's like a Swiss clock. Has all of the cantons of Switzerland on it. Do you want me to be your tour guide today? Should we stop doing this video about the WHO and have more fun being a tour guide. Okay, so this is Leicester Square. This is where you can get, this is where you can watch dumb street performances that have fake crowds around them. This is our most famous international restaurant chain. It's called a Jollibee. It's a sign that we are getting more Filipinos in the UK, which is great. With an aging population, you need that. Okay, second channel, don't care. Goodbye.